look at how that is basically used when doing a tender document, and how that that information is then used to evaluate potential contractors or so. So we're basically going to look at chapters 3, 4, and 6 of Maritz and Siegli. So it's not a lot of work, chapter 3 being probably the bulk of the work. And also a lot of the information in chapter 3 is not really that relevant, especially the history part of it. So I'm going to highlight the most important sections for you during this these 3 lectures that I'm going to record now. Okay, so chapter 3 is all about bills of quantities. That it starts on page 13 of your green book, so you can open there if you want to. And then basically it starts with the explanation of what bills of quantities are. And okay, I've touched on that already in the past. So the main objective of the bills of quantities is to produce a tender document. Okay, so you will hear that I use bills in plural, bills of quantities, because a tender document or bill of quantities comprises a whole lot of different bills in different sections in the different trades. For instance, it usually starts with your preliminaries and general, and then it has your earthworks, and then it has your concrete, masonry, waterproofing, and then it's divided into your roof coverings, and then you've got your structural steel, carpentry and joinery, etc., etc. So it's basically, it just divides your project into different trades to assist in the procurement process. So it tries to follow the logical flow of the project and the different contractors that you need to actually produce the product or the construction project. So you will see as we go into it, it does have a bit of a logical flow. Obviously, some of the items is intertwined with each other as you go along. For instance, if you've got plumbing, you have plumbing a first fix and a second fix. So your first fix is usually your pipe work, chasing in through walls and so forth, whereas your second fix will be your sanitary fittings, where you get your toilets being installed, your baths, your hand wash basins, etc. So although it follows a logical flow, it doesn't follow a logical flow in exactly according to the program. So just bear that in mind. Okay, it shows everything that pertains to the cost of the project as shown in the drawings and prescribed in the specifications. The easiest way to and the shortest way to describe a bills of quantities, it's basically the drawings put into words and quantified into words, so that a contractor can systematically price those items. Okay, so, nothing is left for assumption. So everything is measured. For instance, if there's formwork that has to be used whenever you're doing your concrete pour or so, for instance, if you've got a little bit of a chamfer that you have at the edge on the sides of your concrete beams or so, that has to be measured in, or it has to be described in your item so that the contractor knows how to price for that. It becomes a legal document, especially when doing payments, so that you can go back to something. What did the contractor price for? What did he have to price for? Did he have to include that chamfer? Was he aware of that type of thing? So it's not assumed that in all construction that a chamfer, for instance, would be used, but it's something that's described in your bills of quantities. Okay, It should be simple and describe the materials in full. So you should try and keep it as simple as possible. Then the three main objectives of the bills of quantities is to provide adequate information, comparison to others. The main thing again is to compare apples with apples. Employers can determine accurate costs. Obviously, you've got as much information as possible in your bills of quantities, so it should be very accurate. And then it allows you valuation during the construction process, which is a very important thing to be able to do. If you only have a quote from a contractor per square meter of a new construction or house construction, it is usually difficult to determine exactly what's due to the contractor, because you can't measure it and compare it to what he quoted. So you will have a percentage maybe that you allocate to the progress of the project, so it's not that accurate to actually price that. It also assists, which is not mentioned here, in your cash flow projections, but we'll get to that later on. Okay, so the bills of quantities, these objectives are achieved by it reflects the nature of the work and the circumstances. So for instance, like I mentioned earlier, or before, is if you do your measurements, you usually allow for hard rock, soft rock, is it clay excavations. It describes to the contractor what he should price for and what he should allow for. So it really includes all of that information. It's an interpretation of the whole project and then described to the contractor. It's very important to, if you think about it, if you leave that for assumption and you have 6 different contractors tendering on a project, for instance, if you assume that there's no hard rock and another contractor maybe comes in and he allows a certain percentage for hard rock or so, then it will be difficult to evaluate the tenders and actually get the right comparison, because the one included this and this one maybe included this one excluded this, so it becomes difficult to evaluate the tenders. Okay, it's done on a standard in a standard manner, and we'll get to the standard system later, but it's done in a certain manner. Like I said, it becomes a legal document, it becomes part of the contract, so it has to be done in a certain manner. They are brief and simple to use, yet sufficient to distinguish between the different classes of work. Okay, so this is also relative, brief and simple. It becomes brief and simple as you as you get proficient in measuring on the standard system. Okay, and then we get to this point. It is done on in a certain standard, and there's 3 different methods that you need to know about, although we're going to focus mainly on the standard system of measurement. In South Africa, we use the SANS measurement system a lot. The engineers use this system. It's a quicker way of measuring, but there's a whole lot of rules and regulations connected to that. So you have short descriptions in your bills, which is linked to a big specification at the back of your tenders. The British system is very similar to our standard system, and you can only take note of that. It's because you might encounter that in future, so that you so that you at least know what that there is a system like that. And then you've got the standard system of measurement work, which we're going to focus on, this last one here, and it's a very specific way in how measurements are done. Okay, then the content of the bills of quantities is very important. This you should be able to interpret, so that if you see a bill of quantities, that you at least know where to go and look for items or so. Although you're not going to be involved in it firsthand, it will assist you in actually just being abreast of any site meeting if the QS and the contractor discusses something also. So you've got your bills of quantities are divided into trades. Okay, so the trades I've spoken about already. It should be presented in accordance to the general principles. So there's general principles. We're going to look at the layout just now. It's much easier if you just see it instead of just showing you talking about it. So you've got your bills of quantities. Usually consists out of your cover page, your notes to tenderers. Then you've got your bill 1, which in most cases is your preliminaries. Bill 2 is your earthworks. Bill 3 can be anything else, any other trade that's applicable. For instance, if you've got a refurbishment job, you might not necessarily have earthworks, but you may have shop fitting and those type of trades instead of earthworks or so. Okay, if it's not like a green build. But then it can go into different, a whole lot of bills, up to 20, up into the 20s or so. So then you've got your other trades, provisional sums. You should know about at least what a provisional sum is. Provisional sums is something that's allowed. There's a monetary value given for items, for usually items like your HVAC, or if there's any like a mechanical installation or so that you have to the design is not done when you go out on tender. It's usually done by a contractor, specialist contractor, who does a design and install for that item. So for instance, you would allow 100,000 for your air conditioning, and then what the contractor should do is he should get 3 quotes, and then those 3 quotes is evaluated, and then the best contractor appointed according to those quotes, and then it should be within the budget allowed also. If it's over the budget, then usually a variation order is signed also. And then you've got your summary, all your bills added together. Then you've got your form of tender. Okay, and then you've got an addenda, any addenda if for instance there's any changes that was made also. So this is more or less how this document basically looks, and the layout of it. Then your content of your bills of quantities. Preambles are usually included in your bills. Okay, so preambles is a very fancy word for basically specifications, but preambles just specifies that for instance, if you've got a aluminium installation, the aluminium should be of this standard. If it's natural anodized aluminium, for instance, it should be this color, it should have this strength, it should be this thickness, etc, etc, etc. Okay. On major projects, the BOQ may be divided into sections. Okay, so then basically you will have different bills for different sections. For instance, if you've got a large development and you've got multiple buildings on that development, then your building will be divided into multiple sections, with each with their own trade. So each one of those sections will have a earthworks, a concrete trade, masonry trade, etc. And then the next section will have again your earthworks, your concrete work, your masonry work, etc, etc. Okay. Okay, then you note, it's important to note that individual trades are kept separate. Okay, so that's what we've been discussing now already. So you try not to mix up your trades. For instance, something that does happen, for instance, in your plumbing and drainage trade, you might have some excavations included into that. So what it basically states is you try and keep your trades together. You try and group your items together. So if you've got pipe work, you will try and keep your excavations for that pipe work together with your plumbing and drainage. And then any supplementary special preambles are added. So if you have anything special that you want to add, for instance, if you specify a Lambda board installation or ceiling installation, you can add the Lambda board specifications on how to fix that Lambda board to your rafters, for instance, or to your battens, or if it's suspended ceilings, you can say it should be connected with this type of screws also. Okay, so that is the items that you put in front of your trade. I'll show you guys now how that works. And then the order of items are specific. Try and use your order of items are very specific. It's just easier to locate items. If you think about bills of quantities going into pages up into the thousands of pages, it's just easier if you know that this is more or less the order of these items, and it's just much easier to search for items, and also it just prevents unnecessary misunderstandings. Okay, then the tenderer enters his rate into the rate column. Then he multiplies this the quantity in the quantity column with this rate column, and it gives you amount in the right hand side, and this is added and taken to the summary then of the final summary. So yeah, I'll show you guys now on the layout. Okay, so this is the layout that I've been speaking about. So all of your bills will have this same layout where you have your item number here, you've got your description here, then you've got your unit, your quantity, your rate, and your amount on this side, and then you have your supplementary preambles, anything that you want to add. Let's see what they have added here. So for instance, your brickwork, sizes and descriptions, where sizes and descriptions are given in brick units. One brick shall represent the length of a half brick of width. So okay, this is not just fancy talk of basically saying a one brick wall will be a 220mm wide wall. Okay, and a half brick wall will be 110mm thick wall. Okay. Then you've got hollow walls, what they've described here. Descriptions of hollow walls shall be deemed to include leaving every fifth prepare or perpend of the bottom course of the external skin open as a weep hole. So basically it just makes provision for the weep hole. What I also just usually also add here is your binding wire that you have between your hollow skins on both sides. Every fifth layer there should be a reinforcing connection, and I think I can't remember now at the top of my head, spaced at 1 meter intervals or so. Okay, then it just continues pointing. Description of recess pointing to fair face brickwork shall be deemed to include square recess pointing. Basically it will not be flush. The contractor should allow a amount for actually cleaning out the joints and making it neat. Okay, so very contractual talk used in the bills of quantities. Okay, then you get to the actual items. So you usually have your heading, and then you would specify whether it's top structure, superstructure, in foundations or so. So the standard system prescribes how that is used. You group your brickwork in foundations, in your superstructure, and you also, if it's curved walls, you would measure those items separately. So there's a whole lot of rules like that that you're not really that you don't have to know, but at least you would know that this is how the items are divided. So you've got our first item here is non-facing bricks, so it's basically your standard stock bricks in class 2 mortar, so it's your semi-strong mortar. So you've got, then you measure it in your different elements. So piers is usually measured in cubes, half brick walls in square meters, one brick walls again in square meters, one brick walls in circular on plan. So here you can see it's circular on plan, measured separately. Then you have one brick curbs, 200 millimeters high, measured in length. So the main thing is what you want to do is you want to have a combination of for instance here they included the height, so the contractor knows how high it is, and then he's given a length. So he can easily calculate how many layers of bricks does he need for this length of construction. So the main thing is the contractor should have a complete picture of how he's going to measure or price, what should he allow for this item. Okay, then in the previous slide they just indicated that then the contractor puts in his rates here. That's multiplied with the quantity measured. You get your amount here, and that's added up and put into this item here. Okay, so what they've said here, this is carried to the trade summary. So this is carried to the end of the masonry bill. So obviously there's still a lot of items that's not listed here. For instance, your reinforcing is not measured here. If there's face brickwork, it's measured separately. Brickwork and foundations. If there's a coating that has to be put on to the brickwork also. Then your bills will usually go over a couple of pages. So, but what happens now is each page is added up here, and then you've got a bill summary for this specific bill masonry. There should be a summary, and all of your page amounts are taken over to that and then added up. Okay, and then those page numbers are added up to your final summary. So let's see, here's your masonry, here's the masonry bill that we had a look at. Here it says the page number that the summary of that masonry bill is, and then you add that amount. Okay, and then remember your preliminaries is not a percentage anymore. You've got your measured items in this that the contractor actually price. Like your health and safety, it's specified you're going to be on site for this amount of time. This is the complexity of the building, so the contractor should price for his health and safety. He's going to price for his site establishment, etc. Same with your earthworks, concrete, and so forth. So, and then you can see all the different trades of a standard building listed here. It's all added together. And then you will see allow the amount of 100,000 Rand for contingencies to be used as a directed by the principal agent and deducted in the whole or in a part of the requirement. So basically says let's allow 100,000 just for in case we didn't measure everything, or if the client or someone wants to make a change. We can use this 100,000 Rand, but the contractor should please note that he is not entitled to this amount. This amount is subtracted from this amount if it's not used. So that's what the contingency is for. Okay, then what we also have here is the allow amount of 50,000 Rand for contract price adjustment. So it's basically inflation that's used, and there's a couple of indices that's used on that. So please just take note of that. It's not something that that I'm going to keep you guys busy with. So again, an additional amount of 50,000 Rand is allowed for this. If you've got projects that's going over a couple of years, this amount is very important. Then you get your net amount measured here, you add your VAT, and then you get your final tendered amount, which is carried to your tender form. And then if it's successful, then this is assigned, and this is the contract amount that the contractor is bound for. So this is now, it becomes a quote. So the contractor quotes the client that he will be able to do this work for this amount. Then we get to compilation of BOQs. Two major knowledge areas are required. You have your description of items, which you saw there in the bill of quantities, and then your computation of your quantities. So a quantity surveyor should be able to describe an item very well. So he has to be able to word it very well, and then obviously he has to be able to computate or quantify that amount. The following sequence is used when compiling your BOQ. Okay, so measuring, also known as taking off. So you measure your items. Then you square them. So what happens is, if you do a measurement, the measurement is usually done in the sequence as the project will be built. So you have different trades that you measure, and then you add. Your squaring is basically adding all of those quantities together and then abstracting that into a specific item. Okay, so what happens is you measure your items. For instance, if you measure your foundation walls, the length of it, so you've got your taking off, you measured the foundation wall length. That length can be used for both your brickwork in your foundations and in your superstructure. So that amount that you taken off there, you squared that, and then it's allocated or abstracted to your different items. So that is not that important for you guys, but it's basically you should know that the sequence is, you measure your items. It can be shared between the different trades. The length, for instance, that you've measured, if you've measured the floor square meter area, for instance, for tiling, you can use it again for your ceilings again. The circumference of that square meter that you've measured can be used both for your skirtings and for your cornices. So you keep that items together. So your squaring is basically a grouping of all of your items, and then your abstracting is allocating that to your different items in your BOQ. Okay, and then you've got your description of the items in your BOQ, and then you edit those items. Okay. Then the measuring process itself is, the following is critical important in the measuring process: accuracy and neatness. Obviously, if you think about it, if there's any change to a design, you should be able to go back to your measurement and only amend that section that was changed. But if you did not keep track of your measurements very well, it will basically necessitate you to do a total remeasurement of those items, because you do not know where it stopped and ended. So please be aware of that. It should be very methodical. Excellent knowledge of building science is required. Knowledge of the appropriate measurement systems. Accurate checking of dimensions on drawings. You should be able to read a drawing. You should be able to scale drawings. Full referencing is very important. Clear and unambiguous descriptions is used. So you should be as clear as possible without an objective of maybe saving a bit of money here and there and then withholding some information from a contractor or so. It should be as clear as possible and as short to the point as possible. Okay, so this is just an example of how the measurement work usually looks, and I'm just going to briefly touch on this. I'll, as we get into our elemental estimation, which we'll do after this September block week, I'll I'll expand a little bit more on this, but basically you've got a little system that you use. So for instance, half brick walls, you measure, and then you measure your length, and you've got your screen wall here. So you divide your brickwork into different sections, so you group them again. So you've got half brick walls, which is 110mm brick walls. So you've measured 12.6 meters of them. You measured that they're 2.7 meters high, and there was 3 of those sections that was the same height. Okay, so that is basically how it's measured. So this little item here is known as a multiplier, and then if there's no stripe underneath an item, then it's multiplied with that item. Okay, so very nice and so on. So don't break your head about this. I'm not going to test you guys on how these measurement and squaring papers actually works, but you just need to know that the QS usually does a measurement like this, and then only he takes the quantities, adds them together, group them together, and then adds them to the bill of quantities. Obviously with new measurement systems, it makes life much easier, where you can actually take the quantities from your drawing into your bill of quantities, and it does the grouping for your at the back of the program, so you don't really have to worry too much about this. As long as you've grouped them together, it just makes life much easier. Okay, so yeah, just make sure take note of these measurement papers. Okay, the essentials of a good description. This is very important for me though, because this is what you're going to get involved in each of your projects. If there's a dispute or anything and the description was lacking, yeah, you might get involved as principal agent in it. So in accordance to the standard system, very important. Standard system is very clear on, for instance, if you measure brickwork, any opening less than 0.5 square meters is not deducted from your measurement. Anything above that should be deducted. So for instance, if you've got a small window, it's not going to be deducted, so you measure it over that window. Doors, you have to subtract because it's more than a 0.5 squares that it amounts to. Type and nature first. Okay, so you describe the type and nature first. So you firstly say, okay, we're going to look at a door, and then you describe, okay, it's going to be a hollow core wall or solid wall door or whatever, followed by the detail of the construction. Okay, so and then you might add something like usually 2 meter by 830 millimeter door, hollow core, fitted with 3 hinges to your aluminium sash, for instance. Okay. Then you've got your item. Should be there shouldn't be a conflict in your items. For instance, if you describing let me think of a description. If you, for instance, have a description of a door, it's a 2,032 by 813 millimeter door, and now suddenly you're going to measure in your quantities, you're going to put in a square meter there for your doors. It's going to be in conflict with the actual quantity in your description. So for instance, you describe that you've got 3 of these doors and your quantity is not multiplied correctly, then it will cause a claim from the contractor. So usually your doors are measured in number, given you give the size, you give the quality, and you describe what type of connection it will have. All relevant sizes must be clear or clearly be indicated in the descriptions. Okay, that I've discussed already. So for instance, back to the doors, if you described the door and you've given the length and the breadth, then you can measure it in quantity because the contractor has the length and the breadth. Obviously, you will also in your description give the thickness of the door also, if it's a specific thickness. Otherwise, if that's not given, you will go back to your standard preambles, which says any exterior door will have at least a 65mm thickness also. Okay. All relevant sizes must be indicated in the description. Okay. All special requirements should be indicated. If there's anything special about these items, for instance, if you've got a special fire door, you should say what fire rating it should have, fire rating of an hour, 2 hours, hour and a half or so. Work of two different trades shall not be combined. So you do not combine your different trades together. Separation of items shall not be excessive. Okay, so you're not going to describe this construction of your of a steel gate now suddenly with each little steel section measured out in length together or into different sections. That's just going to be too excessive, and the contractor won't be able to actually understand what needs to happen. So if ever you have a gate, a special ad hoc manufactured gate, you will have the description usually linked with your drawing or so. You give the size, you might even give the weight of it, and then the contractor should price that as a unit. Okay, then allowances. Information is not always available when the BOQ is compiled. Monetary allowances are usually comes in the forms of your contingencies, budgetary allowances, prime cost sums. Your prime cost sums, okay, I've explained the provisional sums earlier, but your prime cost sums is basically what is the basic cost of these items. So your prime cost items will be what would a standard hollow core door from Swartland or whoever actually cost. Okay, so you have that cost, and then you allow an item underneath that for the contractor to put up a markup or the installation cost, etc. Okay, then this is just a side note that I've added here, the relationship between the bills of quantities and the elemental estimate. We're still going to discuss, so I'll discuss this with you. I actually wanted to do in the past, we would have been busy with the elemental estimate now at this stage, but this might actually work very well because we've seen how the bill of quantities actually looks. But now, once we've done this little section in this block week in September, we can actually take a bills of quantities and link that to our elemental estimate. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. Okay, thanks. This is our lecture 10.1. So yeah, please feel free to send any questions or queries to me if you have. Keep well. Bye.